After 35 years of marriage, a husband and wife came for counseling. When asked what the problem was, the wife went into a tirade listing every problem they had ever had in the years they had been married. On and on and on. Neglect, lack of intimacy, emptiness, loneliness, feeling unloved and unlovable, an entire laundry list of unmet needs she had endured. Finally, after allowing this for a sufficient length of time, the therapist got up, walked around the desk, and after asking the wife to stand, he embraced and kissed her long and passionately as her husband watched, with a raised eyebrow. The woman shut up and quietly sat down, in a daze. The therapist turned to the husband and said, "This is what your wife needs at least 3 times a week. Can you do this?" "Well, I can drop her off here on Mondays and Wednesdays, but I fish on Fridays." A woman goes to her boyfriend's parents' house for dinner. This is her first time meeting the family, and she is very nervous. They all sit down and begin eating a fine meal. The woman is beginning to feel a little discomfort thanks to her nervousness and the broccoli casserole. The gas pains are almost making her eyes water. Left with no other choice, she decides to relieve herself a bit and lets out a dainty little fart. It wasn't loud, but everyone at the table heard the poot. Before she even had a chance to be embarrassed, her boyfriend's father looked over at the dog that had been snoozing at the women's feet and said in a rather stern voice, "Ginger." The woman thought, "This is great," and a big smile came across her face. A couple minutes later, she was beginning to feel the pain again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She let a much louder and longer fart rip. The father again looked at the dog and yelled, "Damn it, Ginger." Once again, the woman smiled and thought, "Yes!" A few minutes later, the woman had to let another one rip. This time, she didn't even think about it. She let rip a fart that rivaled a train whistle blowing. Again, the father looked at the dog with disgust and yelled, "Damn it, Ginger! Get away from her before she shits on you." Beverly, 90 years young, had played golf every single day since her retirement, 25 years ago. But one evening, she returned home, looking unusually downcast. "That's it," she told her husband, Gus. "I'm giving up golf. My eyesight has gotten so bad that once I hit the ball, I can't see where it goes." Gus, who was a remarkable 103 years old, made her a comforting cup of tea and said, "Why don't you take me along and give it one more try?" Beverly sighed. "That's no good," she replied. "You're 103. What help could you possibly be?" Gus straightened up proudly and said, "I may be 103, but my eyesight is perfect." The next day, Beverly reluctantly took Gus to the golf course. She teed up, took a powerful swing, and squinted down the fairway. Turning to Gus, she asked, "Did you see the ball?" "Of course I did," Gus replied confidently. "I told you, my eyesight is perfect." "Great," said Beverly, feeling a surge of hope. "So, where did it go?" Gus paused for a moment, then scratched his head. "I don't remember." A little old lady, nearly blind, had 3 sons who adored her. Each one wanted to prove he was the best son by giving her the perfect gift. The first son bought her a sprawling 15-room mansion thinking, "Surely this will make me mom's favorite." The second son gifted her a brand new Mercedes, complete with a chauffeur, convinced he had outdone his brother. But the third son wanted to top them both. He found a parrot that had been trained for 15 years to recite the entire Bible. Just name a verse, and the bird could quote it perfectly. "This will be so useful for Mom since she can't read anymore," he thought. A few days later, the old lady called her first son. "Son, the house is beautiful, but I only live in 1 room. It's way too big for me to clean and take care of. But thank you anyway." She called her second son. "Son, The car is lovely, but I don't drive. And honestly, I don't really like that chauffeur. Please return it. Then she called her third son. My dear sweet boy, I just want to thank you for the most thoughtful gift. The chicken was small, but absolutely delicious. A stunning woman loved growing tomatoes, but no matter what she tried, they just wouldn't turn red. One day, while out for a walk, she spotted her neighbor's garden bursting with huge, bright red tomatoes. Curious, she asked, "What's your secret? How do you get your tomatoes so red?" With a sly smile, the neighbor replied, "Well, twice a day I stand in front of my garden and expose myself. My tomatoes blush so much they turn red instantly." Intrigued, the woman decided to give it a shot. So, for 2 weeks straight, she stood in front of her tomato plants and bared it all, hoping for a miracle. A few days later, the neighbor strolled by and asked, "So, did it work? Are your tomatoes red yet?" She sighed and said, "No, but my cucumbers are out of control." Two medical students were strolling down the street when they noticed an old man walking with his legs wide apart, moving stiffly and slowly. The first student nudged his friend and said, "That poor man must have Peltry syndrome. People with that condition walk exactly like that." The second student shook his head and replied, "No, I think it's Zovitsky syndrome. His slow, wide-legged gait is a classic symptom, just like we learned in class." Unable to agree, they decided to approach the old man to settle the matter. "Excuse us, sir," one student said politely. "We're medical students, and we couldn't help but notice your unusual walk. We were debating which syndrome might explain it. Could you tell us what you have?" The old man smiled and said, "I'll tell you, but first, why don't you share your thoughts?" The first student confidently declared, "I think it's Peltry syndrome." The old man chuckled and replied, "You thought, but you're wrong." The second student then offered, "In that case, I believe it's Zovitsky syndrome." The old man laughed and said, "You thought, but you're wrong too." Curious, the students asked, "All right then, sir, what do you have?" The old man grinned and said, "Well, I thought it was just gas, but I was wrong too." Late at night, a man rushes into a pub and urgently asks the bartender for a glass of water. He drinks it in one gulp, then asks for another. After 6 glasses, he finally catches his breath. "Wow, that's quite a thirst you've got," the bartender says. The man sighs. "Any guy would be this thirsty after what I just went through. I was with a woman in my car, and she's absolutely insatiable. She wants me to go back out there and do it all over again, but I just don't have the energy." The bartender chuckles. "Where's your car?" "Right outside the bar," the man replies. "Tell you what," the bartender grins. "I'll watch the bar while you rest, and I'll go keep her company for you." "Be my guest," the man says, so the bartender steps outside and gets into the car. It's completely dark, and the woman doesn't seem to notice the switch. Without missing a beat, they get right to it. A few minutes later, there's a knock on the window. A police officer shines a flashlight on them. "What's going on here?" the officer asks. The bartender, thinking fast, says, "It's okay, officer, she's my wife." The officer, embarrassed, apologizes. "Oh, sorry, sir, I didn't realize." The bartender looks over at the woman and mutters, "Neither did I until you turned on that light." Two best friends, Tim and Sarah, loved candy more than anything else. Every day after school, they would stop by the corner store and buy bags of gummy bears, chocolate bars, and lollipops. They'd sit on the park bench, munching away and laughing about how they could eat candy forever. One day, Sarah noticed Tim wasn't eating his usual candy stash. Instead, he was munching on a boring apple. "What's going on?" Sarah asked, her mouth full of gummy worms. Why aren't you eating candy? Did you run out of money? Tim shook his head nervously. No, it's not that. I think I need to stop eating candy for a while. Why? Sarah gasped, horrified. Candy is life. Tim leaned in and whispered, because I think I'm turning into candy. Sarah burst out laughing. What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. I'm serious, Tim insisted. Look at this. He rolled up his sleeve and showed her his arm. Sure enough, there were tiny, colorful speckles on his skin that looked like sprinkles. Sarah's eyes widened. Whoa, that's weird. But maybe it's just a rash or something? Tim shook his head. No, it's not just that. Yesterday, I sneezed and a jelly bean came out. Sarah stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or scream. Okay, that's gross, but also kinda cool? Tim sighed. I'm scared, Sarah. What if I turn into a giant gummy bear or something? Sarah patted his shoulder. Don't worry, Tim. If you turn into candy, I'll still be your friend. I'll just eat you slowly. Tim groaned. That's not helping. The next day, Sarah showed up to school with a bag of carrots instead of her usual candy. Tim raised an eyebrow. What's this? Since when do you eat vegetables? Sarah sighed. I think I need to stop eating candy too. Why? Tim asked. Don't tell me you're turning into candy too. Sarah shook her head. No, but last night I had a dream that I was a chocolate bar and someone bit my arm off. I woke up and my arm was sticky. Tim laughed. Okay, that's it. No more candy for either of us. They both agreed to quit candy cold turkey. But a week later, Tim caught Sarah sneaking a chocolate bar behind the school dumpster. Sarah, he yelled. What are you doing? She froze, chocolate smeared all over her face. I couldn't help it, Tim. I was craving it so bad. Tim crossed his arms. Well, don't come crying to me when you wake up as a giant lollipop. Sarah grinned. If I turn into a lollipop, at least I'll be delicious. Constantly being broke and stuck in an unhappy marriage, a young husband decided to solve both problems by taking out a large insurance policy on his wife, with himself as the beneficiary, and then arranging to have her killed. A friend of a friend put him in touch with a nefarious, dark-side underworld figure who went by the name of Artie. Artie explained to the husband that his going price for snuffing out of a spouse was $10,000. The husband said he was willing to pay that amount, but that he wouldn't have any cash on hand until he could collect his wife's insurance money. Artie insisted on being paid at least something up front, so the man opened his wallet, displaying the single-dollar coin that rested inside. Artie sighed, rolled his eyes, and reluctantly agreed to accept the dollar as down payment for the dirty deed. A few days later, Artie followed the man's wife to the local Kohl's. There, he surprised her in the produce department and proceeded to strangle her with his gloved hands. As the poor, unsuspecting woman drew her last breath and slumped to the floor, the manager of the produce department stumbled unexpectedly onto the murder scene. Unwilling to leave any living witnesses behind, old Artie had no choice but to strangle the produce manager as well. However, unknown to Artie, the entire proceedings were captured by the hidden security cameras and observed by the shop's security guard, who immediately called the police. Artie was caught and arrested before he could even leave the premises. Under intense questioning at the police station, Artie revealed the whole sordid plan, including his unusual financial arrangements with the hapless husband, who was also quickly arrested. The next day in the newspaper, the headline declared, Artie chokes 2 for $1 at Kohl's. An 80-year-old Saskatchewan farmer goes to the clinic in Saskatoon for a checkup. The doctor is amazed at what good shape the guy is in and asks, "How do you stay in such great physical condition?" "I'm from Sask, and in my spare time, I like to hunt and fish," says the old guy. "And that's why I'm in such good shape. I'm up well before daylight, in the field plowing and mending fences. And when I'm not doing that, I'm out hunting or fishing. Well, says the doctor, I'm sure that helps, but there's gotta be more to it. How old was your father when he died? Who said my father's dead? The doctor is amazed. You mean you're 80 years old and your father's still alive? How old is he? He's 100 years old, says the old Sask boy. In fact, he worked with and hunted with me this morning, and he's still alive. He's a Saskatchewan farmer, and he's a hunter, and fisherman too. Well, the doctor says, that's great, but I'm sure there's more to it than that. How about your father's father? How old was he when he died? Who said my grandpa's dead? Stunned, the doctor asks, you mean you're 80 years old and your grandfather's still alive? He's 118 years old, says the man. The doctor is getting frustrated at this point. So, I guess he went hunting with you this morning too? No, Grandpa couldn't go this morning because he's getting married today. At this point, the doctor is close to losing it. Getting married? Why would a 118-year-old guy want to get married? Who said he wanted to?